What happens when you combine a chipmunk and a chickadee? Well, I decided to find out. In this video, we are creating a woodland griffin inspired by two ordinary backyard animals. My name is Katora, and you have found the Mythical Maker's Workshop. If this creature really lived outside my window, what would it actually look like? Before I touch any wool, I want to work that out on paper. I'm keeping the body shape true to the chipmunk. Rounded back, a compact frame, and that signature tail. Then I'm borrowing the head and the wings from the chickadee. The goal isn't to make it look like it has been stitched together. I want it to feel like nature could have designed it this way. So I will be paying attention to the proportions. How large the head should be, where the wings should realistically attach, and how the weight should balance on those tiny feet. If I can make it believable here, the felting process should go a lot smoother. Now it is time to take the 2D sketch and turn it into something three-dimensional. The bones of this little woodland griffin are made from armature wire. I shaped the spine, wings, legs, and tail first, just to establish the basic posture. Then I wrap everything in pipe cleaners, so the wool has something to grip onto. Once the skeleton is in place, I began to build up the body with core wool, adding muscles and then rounding out the form. This is where the chipmunk shape starts to appear. Except, at this point, it was starting to look a little more like a tiny horse. So I took a step back and adjusted the proportions off camera and brought it back to that compact chipmunk stance. With the structure corrected, it is time to start adding the fur and giving the woodland griffin its true texture. For the body, I am using a tangerine, a soft caramel, and a nice deep black. They are a little richer than a true chipmunk, but I don't mind leaning slightly saturated. I'm covering the main body and head first, leaving the legs and wings for later. I lay the fiber down gently and begin felting it into place, following the natural direction the fur would grow. For the top layer, I'm working with wool roving. Wool roving has a longer fiber that runs all in the same direction, which makes it ideal for the surface texture. Batting is great for shaping the base, but roving really shines when you want that finished look. For the belly, I take a small strip of wool roving and anchor it to the center first. Then I fold the fiber and continue needling, so they lock in securely. Layer by layer, I fill in the underbelly, letting the fibers overlap naturally. Then, when it's all attached, I give him a careful trim, leaving the chest slightly fuller, and tapering down the stomach just a bit to keep that chipmunk silhouette. I actually came across this idea while doom scrolling on Pinterest one night, and I saw artists combining everyday animals into griffins, so I decided to make one of my own. If you could combine any two backyard animals into griffins, what would you choose? I had way too much fun designing this woodland mashup, and I'm already thinking about making more. After adding the base fur and giving the body its first trim, something still wasn't sitting quite right. The wings and the forearms are fighting with each other visually. So it was time for a little surgery. I carefully removed what would have been the chipmunk's front legs and decided the wings will function as the arms instead. I'll reattach and redefine the wings properly later, but this adjustment immediately felt more balanced. With the reconstruction complete, I moved on to the head, using the same technique as I did for the belly. Once everything was secure, I gave the head a careful trim to define the shape. Then I added the classic chipmunk stripe down the back. For the ears, I used a small piece of black felt. The beak was made from polymer clay. It's actually a leftover piece from a previous project, and the eyes were simple glass beads. I used tacky glue to secure the eyes and beak in place, and then painted over everything with a gloss black. After the paint was dry, I went back in and added a bit more wool around the beak and eyes, just to soften everything up and give him some feathery fluff. Now that the head details are in place, it's time to move on to the feet. For my dear friend Herbert the Hedgehog, I sculpted his feet out of clay. For this backyard griffin, I wanted to try and make the feet out of wool. And wow, they were a lot harder than I was expecting. For the armature, each foot was 28 gauge wire folded in half, roughly 6 inches long. I wrapped a bit of the wool roving around the open end and twisted it closed so the wool was anchored to the wire. Then I went up the wire with some tacky glue to help keep the wool from shifting, and continuing wrapping the wool all the way up. At the end of the wire, I added a little more glue, then twisted the wool wrap wire several times to secure everything in place. After that, I trimmed away the extra wool. Any loose fibers got a small amount of glue, and I wrapped them neatly around the tip for extra security. Next, I shaped the wire into a W. The extra wire was wrapped around the bottom points of the W. This will become the palm of the foot. Then I trimmed and refined the top points of the W, so it had a proper hand shape. And now the detail part begins. I wrapped wool around each fingertip to form the toes, using some tacky glue to smooth and shape the fibers. I trimmed away the excess, and I repeated the process for all 4 feet. Once the hands were ready, I attached them to the legs of the griffin. I used the extra wire from the hands to wrap around the legs. Then I wrapped everything in wool and felted it into place. As a stylistic touch, I added a little extra fluff where the wrist meets the paws. While I am finishing up fancying the feet of our friend, could you do me a favor and hit the like button? If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to follow along for more of our fantasy creations. And one more thing before we get back to the video. If you could leave an emoji in the comment section below, this will let the algorithm know that this video is worth being shared. After a final trim to blend everything together, the feet were done. I'm glad I gave this method a try. It's definitely a technique that takes some practice. But I can already see how much potential it has once I get comfortable with it. Before moving on to the wings, it was time to give him a tail. This was actually one of the easier parts of this project. To create the right chipmunk color, I needed to custom blend my wool. I started with a base of brown, then layered on smaller strands of other colors, and added a bit more brown on top. And began blending by pulling apart the wool and layering it back together. I repeated this motion until I was happy with the multicolored mix. Once the colors looked right, I felted down the center to lock everything together. Then I laid the new fur over the pipe cleaner tail we made earlier. Felted it into place, just down the center, leaving the outer edge loose for the moment. I added a little extra scrap of the multicolored wool I made earlier underneath to secure the tail firmly into the body, and felted it into place as well. After that, I shaped it into more of a chipmunk tail than a squirrel tail. I've seen smaller tails online and I've seen much larger tails online, so I decided to land somewhere in the middle for this guy. To finish it off, I trimmed the edges so they weren't so blunt and then gave the whole tail a little more fluff. With the tail sorted out and fluffed to perfection, There is no more avoiding it. It is time to make the wings. By now, he is no longer wool and wire. He is becoming a creature, and every creature like this needs wings. So when designing the wings, I thought very carefully about scale, keeping them close to what you might see on a chickadee. Before landing on this method, I tested several different approaches. The technique I chose is inspired by Helen Winter's textile art, who has a wonderful tutorial on creating realistic feathers. I followed her general method with one small adjustment. Instead of using fusing tape, I used Heat and Bond Ultra Hold No-Sew sheets. To begin, I lay down strips of light gray wool onto a piece of parchment paper, keeping the layer thin and not too bulky. Once arranged, I placed the Heat and Bond sheet glue side down on top of the wool. With my iron set to the wool setting, I carefully press the layers together. When I am ironing, I'm making sure to lift and press, not slide, so the fibers won't shift. After letting it cool slightly, I peel it off the parchment paper, remove the backing from the glue sheet, and flip it over, making sure the glue side is facing up now. Next, I laid several pieces of 28 gauged wire across the sheet, each about 4 inches long. I spaced them evenly as I could by eye, leaving roughly an inch of the wire extending past the edge. That exposed section would later wrap around the wing structure to secure each feather in place. Then I did a thin layer of black wool over top of the wires, placed the parchment on top again, and gave it one more careful press with the iron. Whenever I am building something imaginary, I try keeping one foot in reality. Even though he's a fantasy, I want him to feel like he could exist in reality. Once cooled, I cut the sheets into strips and shaped each one into a feather form. These became the primary feathers. Off camera, I repeated the process to recreate the secondary feathers as well. Now it is time to build the wing structure. I took a piece of the armature wire and poked it directly through the body. Locked it into place with a little bit of felted wool at the base. It's always a good feeling to know you can get such an enthusiastic approval from your project manager. With the base secure, I built up a thin layer of wool along the armature to give the feathers something to anchor to. To attach them, I started with the smaller feathers closest to the body, using tacky glue to hold them in place, while checking that the wings will still have a little range of motion. In theory, they should be slightly posable, which would make it fun for pictures later. From there, I worked outward towards the tip of the wing, gluing each feather in place and wrapping the wire around each structure for extra security. Once everything was in place, I used a little bit of black felt to help clean up the attachment points. And just like that, the wings are complete, which means we are officially entering the final detail stage. With the wings complete, it was time for the final pass. After seeing everything together, I realized I wasn't completely happy with the shape of the head. So I added a little more fluff around the throat of the chickadee portion and softly transitioned it into the rest of the body. Then I gave him one last trim to refine the silhouette, to fluff him up and get him ready to go play outside. And the very last touch is a bit of paint on his nails so they would stand out against the paws. A project like this is why I love creature builds, taking wool and wire and turning it into something that feels like it could exist. If you enjoyed this backyard griffin, make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss the next one. Now let's take him outside.